Russian President Vladimir Putin rolled out a seemingly endless red carpet for his dear friend Xi Jinping during the Chinese leader's 3-day trip to Moscow. In a rare move, the Russian president even escorted Xi to his car following the 4-hour talks and lavish dinner. But did Putin's charm offensive pay off? The visit came at a time of growing Russian isolation and just days after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for the Russian leader over alleged war crimes in Ukraine. The ongoing war was barely mentioned by the leaders. Instead, Xi and Putin used the stage to affirm their alignment on a host of issues, including their distrust of the US. But their readout following the meeting stated that while the two countries share a close partnership, it does not mean a military political alliance. Putin endorsed the yuan as Russia's foreign currency of choice, and at the end of it all, got an invite to visit China later this year, painted by Russian state TV as proof of unwavering friendship. But how close is the relationship in reality? Should the West be wary of Russia becoming China's new vessel? Are we facing a new Cold War or leftovers from the last one? Should the West be worried about a potential China-Russia military alliance?
All right, so let's get right into it. Should the West be worried about a possible Russia-China military alliance? Let's bring in our panel, Nick Kolyohin, Alexander Pevzner, and Tommy Steiner. Nick, we'll start with you. You know the rules, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
The West, of course, should be really worried about this partnership because this is the beginning of forming coalitions that could become a military alliance, and those powers could collide and it could start a third world war if somebody reasonable in the world, some of the world leaders, would not stop it now, because this is the last chance.
Alexander, same question. Your thoughts?
Sure. Well, we have seen a certain caution on the part of China defining the relationship with Russia. They repeated the definition of non-confrontation, no conflict, and not targeted at the third party. But on the other hand, the formula of boundless, limitless friendship that surfaced for the first time in 2022 is gone from this year's statement. So you can see China is hedging its bets.
And Tommy, finally, should the West be worried about this possible alliance?
First of all, it's not going to be an alliance. China does not get into military alliances. At least it never has, and it's unlikely to do so. But this is a partnership, very close one. Should the West be worried about it? It is worried about it, but it also reflects a lot of concern, if not fear, on the Russian and on the Chinese side as well. It's not a one-sided story here.
All right, gentlemen, let's open up the discussion. Nick, I want to go back to you. Experts are saying that China and Russia are trying to instill a new world order against countries like the United States. Can the U.S. and their allies in the West really even do anything about it?
After USSR fell apart in the beginning of the 90s, Russia wanted to be part of this Western world, and also China wanted for many decades to be part of this world. But the West, as long as I understand it, they just want to grab more money, more power, and they want a geopolitical gain, and then they want to be the only hegemony power in the world. So because of that, it left no chance, no other way for China or Russia to act. This is their only chance. If they want to be some kind of world powers, they need to stay against the West in this new world.
Alexander, how do you respond to that? That if they must stand up to the rest of the world, should they want to be a world power stronger than the United States?
I think it would be a real challenge to prize China and Russia apart. If there ever was a moment like that, which I doubt, it is long, long gone. this it's not a formal alliance, by the way. There is no formal alliance between Russia and China, but certainly the ties are very close. It is rooted both in practical, realist considerations, but also in ideology. I think there is a genuine ideological affinity between Russia and China, even though there are also serious differences in their approach to the world. Obviously, China is a more careful, cautious actor with an eye to Europe and to the global south. But definitely they need each other, for sure.
Tommy, just how badly do they need each other?
Well, arguably, Russia needs China more than China needs Russia. There's no doubt here. And what we see here is a shift from what was once a partnership in which Russia or the Soviet Union was the senior partner and China was the more junior one. Now the roles have reversed, and China is the leading power. There's no doubt about it. And yes, and Russia needs China now more than ever. But there's one thing that has to be said here. And I listened to Nick's record of what happened over the past since the end of the Cold War. When it comes to China, at least, the West went out of its way, and to some extent, some in the West still do, in trying to engage China. And even the more dovish Democrats in the United States, and even the more left-wing oriented in Europe, have come to the conclusion that the engagement with China did not work. And at the end of the day, they are concerned about Chinese activities, Chinese actions, Chinese plans and ambitions. And the response we see today is actually a response coming to what was to aggressive, assertive Chinese action statements, policies over the past decade.
Well, Nick, would you agree with that? That China needs Russia more than Russia needs China?
I think they both need each other, and both of them couldn't be alone in this new world, because Russia has the military power and China has the economic power, and they complete each other with this. Also, Russia has all the supplies that China may need to remain the powerhouse of the world, like gas, oil, and other materials, raw materials. And Russia needs Chinese products because in some parts of technology, Russia really advanced it good, but at other parts of technology, it relied on the West, and now it should rely on China, because it will take them many years to develop their own technologies. So yeah, they need each other.
Let's shift to the economy now. Alexander, Vladimir Putin says that Moscow is ready to support Chinese business, especially after a lot of Western businesses left Russia post-invasion of Ukraine. What kind of economic influence could China have if they were to go into Russia and replace all of the Western enterprise that left?
China is already deeply involved in Russia. I mean, Chinese companies have been quick off the mark to take the place of Western firms that have left Russia after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I want to highlight one thing. I mean, I agree with Tommy that there is an imbalance of power, and certainly China is the senior partner. I think Russia is not without leverage. And one point is exactly economic. I mean, we're talking about 3 years of COVID policy that devastated the Chinese economy. The Chinese are very happy to get this opportunity from Russia. And in fact, while most of the attention was naturally on Ukraine and their, sort of standoff with the West, the two sides actually emphasized the economy greatly in their statements. Putin gave a long talk about how how Russia will provide China with food and all others economic benefits. So it's not just about grandstanding or showing off to the U.S. There's a real economic benefit, and we've seen that bilateral trade rose more than 30% last year to a record almost 190 billion, which is impressive.
Well, as we said, China and Russia are trying to create a new world order, trying to dominate the world's economy. So are we facing potentially a new Cold War, or perhaps leftovers of another one? What do you think, Tommy?
Well, there is a problem with using the metaphor of the Cold War. There is a great power rivalry. Likening it to the Cold War is problematic because it's rather different. Because unlike the Cold War, where there was an iron curtain that descended upon between the West and East, here the two great powers are deeply interconnected even to this day, and therefore it's a different story. We're living in a different world, also in terms of the technologies involved. So likening it to the Cold War is a bit superficial. There's a rivalry. It is going to be a feature that will be with us for quite some time. I don't want to talk about, midterm, long term. I'm Israeli at the end of the day. For us, long term is tomorrow morning. But in terms of Cold War relations or great power rivalries, we're in for a rivalry that can last at least a decade. Of course, things can happen in the meantime, but at the end of the day, this seems to be a long-term feature, a rivalry.
Nick, tell us your thoughts in about 30 seconds here. What do you think about the potential of a new Cold War?
I think we have a good potential for this war, nuclear war, unfortunately, because China and Russia, they wouldn't withstand all the NATO power without using nuclear weapons. It's impossible for them. So unfortunately, it will be the only solution for them to use those nuclear powers. But let's hope that the West will not go all the way with its war in Ukraine. That, of course, Russia invaded Ukraine, as they say, in unprovoked war. But I think it was a bit of provoked, let's say like this. So both sides need now to sit down and have a peace agreement before it will be too late.
In what way was this provoked? In what way was this war provoked? I just don't understand. What did Ukraine do?
Gentlemen, we've got to take a short break now. We're going to dive right back into it right after this break. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Global Eye. Thanks for staying with us. Our panel on deck. But before we get started, let's take a listen to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Of course, we did not ignore the situation around Ukraine. We believe that many of the provisions of the peace plan put forward by China are constant with Russian approaches and can be taken as the basis for a peaceful settlement once they are ready for that in the West and in Kiev. However, so far, we see no such readiness from their side.
All right, our panel still with us. Journalists Nick Kolyohin, Alexander Pevzner, lecturer on China at the Lauder School of Government, and Tommy Steiner, a policy director at Signal. Nick, let's start with you. 30 seconds on the clock. How serious is the Chinese peace plan when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, if at all?
I think it's a serious plan because actually this is the only plan right now that one of the powers or big countries suggested. And China saying that they should go and speak between themselves and stop this war and reach agreement. And this is as simple as that. People just need to stop fight and start talk. So yeah, for me it's a really serious deal and really serious proposal because right now people just fighting each other.
Alexander, same question.
It is serious, but it's serious in the sense that he wants to present China as a responsible stakeholder and a peacemaker. I don't think it will bring peace because basically, I mean, there's no mention in any of the Chinese documents of a reversal of Russia's territorial gains. Basically, it aims to freeze the situation, but it's not aimed at Ukraine. It's aimed at the global south. It's aimed at Europe in general. I don't think peace will break tomorrow.
And Tommy, what do you think? The Chinese peace plan when it comes to Russia-Ukraine, is it serious?
Well, I agree. It's a very serious proposal in the sense that it's serious in trying to present China as a responsible leader of the world and try to demonstrate to the global south they can stand up to the United States. But it's no surprise that it was accepted by Russia because it parrots the Russian position, and therefore it will not fly. It has no chance whatsoever.
All right, we're going to get to the war in Ukraine, more on this topic just a second. But before the break, Tommy, I want to hear your thoughts. Nick said that he actually can envision a Cold War coming soon. Finish your thoughts.
Well, actually, Nick was talking about a hot war, not a Cold War. But I don't think that the parties will reach that point, even though Putin is playing a very dangerous game. But he was cautioned more than once, not directly, but very clearly, by President Xi, or if you recall, the visit of the German Chancellor to Beijing, and also after the meeting between Biden and Xi, there were clear statements about that leaders should not use or refer to nuclear weapons. So I think that talk should be left off the table. It's not even serious. I don't think, clearly, not China and the United States do not want to reach a collision, a war or a hot war. And in that sense, the rivalry will continue. And I think that both sides will be cautious and careful not to bring out all-out war.
Nick, what do you think about that?
I think that from my perspective, Russia and China really serious about what they are saying, and the West is just trying to make of that a grotesque plan, and they just always trying with their hypocrisy, showing which behind-the-scenes interests has China and has Russia, but they don't really try to solve this conflict, and it makes me think, why? Who gains from this war more of all? Who the one that gain the most power, money, influence, and better geopolitical position because of this war? And the answer to this question, from my perspective, is the United States.
Tommy, I see you'd like to jump in there.
Yeah, but it's true. At the end of the day, the West, or I would say actually the Atlantic Alliance, gained much more from this war because of Putin's mistakes. There's no doubt about that. On that, I agree. He wanted to weaken NATO. Instead, he got a very strong NATO and then even enlarged NATO. That was clearly mistakes and blunders that even President Xi did not expect him to do. But having said that, it doesn't mean that it's the United States' fault. The United States warned Putin repeatedly not to go ahead, not to invade. And Ukraine's inclusion in NATO at the time was not even on the table. It was a joke in that sense, being seriously raised that Ukraine is about to join NATO, not in the next decade, if at all. Actually, now it's more likely when the war ends. But there will not be an end to, but in that sense, the West is supporting Ukraine because if Putin wins in Ukraine, the next stop will be Georgia, perhaps other countries, perhaps other NATO countries. And therefore, the West is supporting Ukraine. Therefore, Israel should be a bit more steadfast in its support for Ukraine.
Alexander, let's get you in here. What do you think about these comments?
Yes, I want to add something about the Cold War. I agree with Tommy that it's a question of definition and we have to be careful. But I think if it's not a Cold War, if it's not a new Cold War, then it's definitely a close cousin. Because we have certain elements of the previous Cold War that repeat themselves. First of all, we have very clearly, and we started the program with this, an ideological competition that is obvious. We have we are at an early stage of bloc formation. We have possibly this new Cold War's first proxy war, just like we had in the old Cold Wars. You know, one very interesting thing that came from the press conference on March 7th of China's new foreign minister, Qin Gang, is that China would hold the first China Central Asian Summit. This is a new thing. And, you know, we see that Russia's position, for example, in Central Asia has been greatly weakened by this war. And, you know, someone is smelling blood and wants to take opportunity for this. So I do see certain elements that are similar to the previous Cold War, unfortunately.
All right, Nick, let's get back to you very quickly. So China wants to make itself as a peace broker, but President Xi hasn't even spoken to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, but reports say that discussions are in the works, underway to organize a call. No other really details at this time. What would that call even look like on Zelensky's end, talking to Xi, who is an ally of Putin?
I think Chinese president knows really well as Russian president, that the real boss, the real curator, and the one that they should talk to is Joe Biden, and not to President Zelensky, with all the respect, because Biden is the one that taking the shots, and he's the one that will decide what will happen in this war and how it will end. Okay, so that's why I think President of China will not speak with President of Ukraine, because it will not solve the problem. And it will not end the war. And the proposition for a peace plan that China gave, it was because nobody other did it. And nobody even tries to speak about peace. Everybody just speaks about more jets, more tanks, more bombs. Everybody's speaking about ideology. This is the war between democracy, autocracy, but this is not the real deal. It's all about money.